Okay, good afternoon. With a quorum being present, I now call to order the October 3rd, 2023 meeting of the Hudson River Park Trust Board of Directors. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and the video will be posted on the Trust's website, and a stenographer will provide a transcript of the meeting. The directors have received the agenda materials in advance of this meeting and are free to ask questions or comment at any time on the action items submitted for approval today. Please note, however, questions or comments from the audience will not be entertained at this meeting. I note that the board memos and resolutions on today's agenda have been posted on the Trust's website in the link entitled Board Meetings, Bylaws, and Other Materials under Board Agendas and Minutes, and thus are available to the public. There are 7 items on the consent agenda. 1, approval of the minutes and ratification of the actions taken at the June 20, 2023 meeting of the Hudson River Park Trust Board of Directors. 2, authorization to contract with TGI Office Automation for copier leasing and maintenance services. 3, authorization to extend contract term for WL Concepts and Production, Inc. and top and bottom wear for on-call logoed seasonal uniform component service. 4, ratification and approval of extension of contract term with Abel Bainson Butts LLP for Chelsea Waterside Park Phase 2 design services. 5, ratification and approval of extension of contract term with Gilbane Building Company for Pier 26 construction management services. Ratification and approval, number 6 is ratification and approval of extension of contract term with Deborah Bradley Construction and Management Services, Inc. for Pier 97 shade structure fabrication and installation. And number 7, ratification and approval of extension of contract term with County Fire, Inc. for park-wide monitoring, inspection, repair, and maintenance of fire alarm systems. Unless anyone has comments, I will now call for a motion to approve all of the items on the consent agenda. Second. And all in favor? Aye. Opposed? No opposed. Abstentions? No abstentions. So the motion is approved. The first corporate action before the board is approval of the list of on-call architecture and engineering services firms. Now we have Ms. Doyle.
Thank you. Staff has identified a need to retain 1 or more on-call architecture and engineering firms to support periodic small and medium-scale capital maintenance projects, such as reconstruction of existing building components, conducting building assessments, and potentially space planning. In accordance with the Trust procurement guidelines, an advertisement for the on-call architecture and engineering services RFP was published in the New York State Contract Reporter and on the Trust website between the period of June 2nd, 2023 and July 10th, 2023, and the Trust received 19 proposals by the submission deadline. A selection committee comprised of Trust staff reviewed the submissions and evaluated each according to the identified selection criteria in the RFP, and then interviewed 7 respondents. The selection committee determined that Marvell Architects, H2M Architects, and Nelligan White Architects each offered well-qualified teams and proposed favorably hourly rates for the desired on-call services. The Trust seeks to enter into 3 separate on-call contracts with each firm for a 4-year term. All 3 firms have extensive experience providing similar services for government agencies, including numerous New York City and state agencies and public benefit corporations, such as the New York City Department of Design and Construction and the New York State Dormitory Authority. Trust staff therefore requests board authorization to enter into 3 separate contracts with Marvell, H2M, and Nelligan for on-call architecture and engineering services for a total aggregate board authorization amount of up to $2 million over a 4-year period. Each contract would be funded initially with $200,000 based on the current adopted budget. Based on project needs, additional funding for the contracts will be identified through the capital maintenance portion of the Trust annual operating budget as may be approved by the Board of Directors each year.
Are there any questions? If not, I'll call for a motion to approve the list of on-call architecture and engineering services firm.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None opposed. Abstentions? No abstentions. The motion is approved. The second corporate action item before the board is authorization to contract with Loduca Associates, Inc. for Pier 45 decking and framing repair. Noreen Doyle?
Thank you. The trust needs to reconstruct the wood decking along the southern and western portions of Pier 45. The current decking and beams were installed in 2001 and are reaching the end of their intended service life. An advertisement for the Pier 45 decking, framing, and repair RFP was published in the New York State Contract Reporter and on the trust website for the period of July 31st, 2023 through August 31st, 2023. And the trust received 5 proposals by the submission deadline. A selection committee comprised of trust staff reviewed the submissions and evaluated each submission according to the identified selection criteria in the RFP. Interviews were conducted with the top 3 ranked firms. Based on the submitted proposals and interviews, trust staff determined Loduca Associates, Inc. to be the highest ranked respondent. Loduca has completed work for a number of municipalities in the state, including for state parks. The trust staff therefore requests board authorization to contract with Loduca Associates, Inc. for Pier 45 decking, framing, and repair in an amount not to exceed $1,133,000 plus a 10% contingency for a total board authorized amount of up to $1,246,300. Funding for this contract will be provided from discretionary capital budget funds allocated by the City of New York through the City Council.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? If not, I will call for a motion to authorize the trust to contract with Loduca Associates, Inc. for Pier 45 decking and framing repair.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. The motion is approved. The third corporate action item before the board is authorization to amend the contract with Kelco Construction, Inc. for Pier 97 general construction. Noreen Doyle?
At its June 2021 meeting, the board authorized the trust to contract with Kelco Construction, Inc. for the general construction of Pier 97. The scope of work generally includes installation of a distinctive new playground, multipurpose activity field, flexible gathering space, sun lawn, belvedere, overlook, sunset deck, unit paved pathways, and lush plantings. Construction of Pier 97 is nearing completion, and staff expects to be able to open the pier to the public later this fall. However, staff has identified a need to change the structural design of the planned wood decking on a portion of the pier to accommodate the vehicles that will need to access the pier periodically without risk of damage to the surface. To increase the load-bearing capacity and durability of the Pier 97 wood decking at the western end of the pier, additional joists and footings will be added to reduce the span of the deck boards. To minimize the cost impact, the wood decking finish at the flexible gathering area in the center of the pier has been changed to concrete unit pavers of the same type used elsewhere in the project. The New York City Public Design Commission has reviewed the proposed material change and approved it. Trust staff therefore requests board authorization to amend the Kelco contract for Pier 97 general construction by adding $600,000 for a total board authorized amount of up to $25,029,670. Funding for this amendment is available from New York State and the trust restricted funds from the sale of transferable development rights.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments? Not, I'll call for a motion to authorize the trust to amend the contract with Kelco Construction, Inc. for Pier 97 general construction.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. The motion is approved. The fourth corporate action item before the board is adoption of SECRA findings and authorization to consent to Office of General Services issuance of a permanent easement to Amtrak for the Hudson Tunnel project. Noreen Doyle?
The Hudson River Park Act, as amended in 2018, authorizes the alienation of a portion of Hudson River Park for the granting of a permanent vested easement for the Hudson Tunnel project, subject to the trust's approval. Pursuant to the Public Lands Law, the New York State Office of General Services is authorized to issue such permanent easement on behalf of New York State and its agencies. OGS has prepared a proposed indenture to be issued to the National Railroad Passenger Corporation, also known as Amtrak, that would authorize the construction and operation of a new rail tunnel within a below-grade permanent easement in the land and water portions of the park between West 29th Street and West 30th Streets, and state parks and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, which each have ultimate jurisdiction over the relevant underlying property, have each provided their consent. The tunnel will be located at a depth of between 25 and 45 feet. Trust staff has negotiated for various access and construction rights and other terms associated with its consent to the permanent easement, as more fully described in your board memo, and as I will briefly detail shortly. However, before the board may consider the requested consent to OGS's proposed indenture and associated consideration agreement, the trust board must first adopt the trust secret findings. A combined final environmental impact statement and record of decision, or ROD, for the Hudson Tunnel project was prepared and issued in accordance with the National Environmental Policy Act, with the Federal Railroad Administration serving as the lead federal agency and New Jersey Transit Corporation and the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey serving as joint lead agencies. The combined FEIS and ROD were issued on May 28th, 2021, and were reviewed by the trust staff. The FEIS identified the potential for adverse impacts within the park, including impacts to the historic bulkhead, to aquatic species located in the estuarine sanctuary, and to the park itself during construction. The FEIS also identified various mitigation measures that would be implemented to minimize such impacts, including but not limited to preparation and implementation of both a construction protection plan and a bulkhead protection plan for use during construction of the new tunnel, and use of cofferdams and turbidity curtains to minimize in-water impacts. As addressed in the secret findings statement previously shared with the board, the trust staff has considered the facts and conclusions in the FEIS and ROD and has weighed and balanced the relevant environmental impacts with social, economic, and other considerations, and has determined that the FEIS meets the requirements of SECRA, including the SECRA regulations set forth in 6 New York City RR Part 617, and that the adverse environmental impacts disclosed in the FEIS and relevant for the park will be minimized by the mitigation measures proposed for the Hudson Tunnel project to the maximum extent practicable. I therefore request that the board authorize the adoption of the trust secret findings statement, after which I will provide more information on the proposed indenture itself.
Okay, are there questions or comments on the secret findings?
The tunnel project is being done in phases, and the first activity is expected to be actually beyond our property limits, west of the United States Pier headline, work doing ground stabilization work in the middle of the Hudson River itself. As to the area for us, I think the latest estimate is potentially, I'm looking around here, the tail, and we.
December 2024.
Right. December 2024 is the earliest possible in Hudson River Park activity.
Month thing with, yes.
Yes.
So like 2025 and
I would like to thank the staff that worked hard to identify mitigations and really protect the park as much as possible in what's going to be a necessary but disruptive process.
Thank you. Certainly a necessary project.
Any other comments? Okay. I'll call for a motion for the board to approve the adoption of the trust secret findings for the Hudson Tunnel project. Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. The motion is approved. Ms. Doyle, please continue your presentation of the proposed easement.
Thank you. The proposed form of indenture prepared by OGS for the required below-grade easement is more fully described in the board memo previously sent to the board. It would provide Amtrak with an approximately 150-foot wide easement area below the surface of both the park's water area east of the United States Pier headline and east of the United States Pierhead Line and the adjacent upland area located between the bulkhead and the Route 9A bikeway, both through New York State-owned parcels. The permanent easement would allow for the construction and operation of the new Hudson Project rail tunnel to be located about 25 to 45 feet below the surface of the park. The trust would not be permitted to construct any buildings over the easement area. The proposed indenture requires Amtrak and its contractors to maintain commercial general liability insurance, naming New York State and the trust as additional insured, and to indemnify the state and the trust from any property damage or injuries to persons related to the Hudson Tunnel project. At the trust request, OGS has added an exhibit to the proposed indenture that identifies specific requirements to protect the park and its design and operations. Prior to commencing tunnel construction, Amtrak must obtain a separate construction permit from the trust that incorporates appropriate construction and bulkhead protection plans. Additionally, Amtrak will be required either to restore the area temporarily affected by construction to a condition and standard identified in plans prepared by the trust, or to provide funding to the trust in lieu thereof. Amtrak must seek a work permit from the trust for any maintenance work that may be required in the easement area after the rail tunnel is in operation. Amtrak must comply with a bulkhead impact agreement that will be prepared pursuant to the Section 106 programmatic agreement, of which the trust is a signatory, that will require Amtrak to provide long-term maintenance of a defined section of the historic bulkhead. The trust will retain the right to construct, replace, and maintain typical park uses and materials over the easement without requiring Amtrak's advance approval if excavation within or established parameters, including that the trust work is no deeper than 5 feet and that the maximum net allowable surcharge load is less than 500 pounds per square foot. Trust staff is satisfied that these additional requirements will protect the interests of the park and allow the trust to build, operate, and maintain typical park open space uses over the easement area in a manner consistent with other open space areas of the park. Separately, Amtrak and the trust have worked together to prepare a proposed consideration agreement, which form of agreement has also been shared with the board, which would require Amtrak to pay the trust $8,670,500 prior to commencing construction of the Hudson Tunnel project in compensation for the Amtrak requirements affecting the park within the easement area based on an independent professional evaluation of the affected property area. I should further note that while the act provided the trust with the right to enter into a lease agreement with Amtrak for a lease term equivalent in length to that of its master lease with New York State, the issuance of such agreement is not a requirement of the act and would be duplicative of the rights and obligations placed on Amtrak by the trust through the proposed indenture prepared by OGS and the compensation to be paid to the trust under the proposed consideration agreement. The trust does not itself own any real property, so the OGS indenture from the relevant state agencies is required regardless. Recording two separate agreements purporting to convey similar rights to Amtrak for the same right-of-way area would be highly unusual and could create confusion. Accordingly, the trust staff believes it is in the trust's best interest to consent to OGS's issuance of the proposed indenture that includes the necessary terms that protect the park and the trust. Accordingly, staff seeks approval by the board for the trust first to consent to OGS issuing the proposed indenture for the permanent easement to Amtrak for the Hudson Tunnel project, and second, to enter into the proposed consideration agreement.
Are there any questions regarding OGS's issuance of the permanent below-grade easement or the trust's entering into the proposed consideration agreement with Amtrak?
Can I just hear the 8 million thing again?
The amount is $8,670,500. That is once, and that is for the permanent easement. We will separately be negotiating with Amtrak for the construction impact and the permit that we would have for that.
Right, so that's just a one-shot payment.
Correct.
For forever easement.
Forever.
Could be yearly, I'm just saying.
In terms of the geography over it, we just need maintenance, right? We don't have plans over.
We will have, we expect that we will have park plans, and that area of the park is currently the heliport. As you know, we've been talking with the state and the city about the heliport. So the tunnel would enter the park where the heliport is located. The act requires that Amtrak restore the park to the condition identified by the trust. So we would expect either to be able to identify plans to Amtrak in sufficient time before the completion, or potentially, as we said, they could potentially give us the funding for the equivalent, and we would, I'm sure, have to document, the basis of such funding request, and that would have to be reasonable, but that's the alternative for that. And, something else worth saying is that while we would have been allowed to build a concession or a park building, we're not allowed to have a true commercial use in that area. So, no huge revenue generating use for the park either.
Okay, are there other questions or comments?
Yeah, how do they maintain the tunnel going forward? Like they don't go down into it, they go through the tunnel?
There are access shafts that they would use to maintain it.
Is there a shaft that comes up into the park? I guess is my question.
I do not think so. I'm looking at, yes, right. So the agreement also includes something that, while the easement is for the whole 150-foot approximately area ground down, there are restrictions on what could be put by the tunnel above it so as not to affect park uses.
Yeah, I just want to add the construction, when the construction to the bulkhead, that's when there will be having excavation in the park during an 18-month construction period. But once it's constructed, their shaft will be over at Hudson Yard site. So there's not going to be any manholes or anything in the park after the tunnel's constructed.
We have a number of tunnels that already come through the bulkhead, obviously.
I think I just had a quick question. The easement is a one-time payment. Then there's a decision on whether they do reconstruction or we get a payment for that. And then is there anything attached to maintenance or special considerations that have to be thought about or expenses with regards to maintenance over
So
the tunnel?
the construction permit is, I think, what you're referring to as the second category. So we've done this before with other agencies. When they need to come in and do construction, we negotiate for the term and the conditions and a bikeway safety plan and all of those other things, as well as a payment. So that's the construction permit. One of the things that we discussed, because of the need to maintain the bulkhead through which the tunnel comes, is that we will be developing with Amtrak a set of parameters that requires Amtrak to monitor. Essentially, there'll be some kind of zone of impact. That's my term, not the term that we're using right now, but just to convey the idea, so that if something were considered to be associated with the tunnel rather than like the horticulture truck, there would be some kind of basis for having that discussion in the future.
With financial contribution?
Either
Yeah.
that or responsibility in
Okay.
some way. Did I, Chris, anything to correct there?
It doesn't, the financial contribution is really easement payment, and there'll be rent during the construction permit. But the maintenance would be, they'll have to do monitoring, and perhaps there'll be some period of maintenance of the bulkhead before it comes back to us. But there's nothing in the act beyond. It's just like any other Holland tunnel. Once it's there, it's there.
Okay.
Now, if they have to come in for work permits, at that point, we may have to charge rent, 50, 60 years now for individual work permits. We change it, right? They need to come into our park to excavate, to fix something, then we would have work permits. It's like we do when DEP comes there, anybody else comes into the park.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I will now call for a motion to authorize the trust to consent to the Office of General Services issuance of a permanent easement to Amtrak for the Hudson Tunnel project.
So moved.
Okay, second,
Second.
all in favor? Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. The motion is approved. And for the third resolution related to the Hudson Tunnel project, I will now call for a motion to authorize the trust to enter into the consideration agreement with Amtrak. Moved. Yes. Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. The motion is approved. Okay. Thank you. That completes the board action items for approval today. I'd now like to ask Noreen Doyle to present the president's report.
It's been a while since we've met, and while this is not exactly short, I could go on a lot longer because it's of course our busy season, but I'll try to keep it brief. But we've had some big news. I will begin with the obvious place to begin, which is of course the opening of the new park areas at the Gansevoort Peninsula yesterday. It was a gorgeous day. Is the slide deck up? It was a gorgeous day. I suspect I am not the only person who got a sunburn. It was definitely a beach day. In addition to Deputy Mayor Zoshi, who represented Mayor Adams, Commissioner Donahue, Pam Frederick, Rose Harvey, and Id Arwede were able to make it from our board. And of course, we were also thrilled to be joined by Governor Hochul and Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine and at least a couple of hundred other happy people. Everyone who was there yesterday heard me thank a lot of people, and it's important to say it for the record, but more briefly here too. Credit goes to the design team led by field operations, to N Architects, to Gilbane and Invictus, our construction managers, to the Whitney Museum that brought us Days End, to our many government partners, including DEC and state and city parks right here, to our elected officials, community board too, the advisory council, and Hudson River Park Friends. Madeline Wills and all the individual people and organizations that have advocated for the park for decades, every individual on our staff, and of course, Kevin Quinn and Tom Adams, who was our project manager, and they both did a superb job. If you had been visiting last Friday in all the awful rain before the floods, the even worse floods of Friday, but you know, it rained forever, it seemed like, you would never have assumed in a million years we'd be able to meet the Monday deadline for opening. Rain slowed our ability to dot a few I's on site, such as finishing the dog run and the shared service road with the fire department, both of which will open before month's end, with the park building soon to follow. But the construction managers, Kevin and Tom, contractors, Con Edison, Rob Rodriguez, Christina Singh, Dwayne Cremona, Matt Post, Robert Atterbury, and dozens of other staff members got us into shape, working all weekend, including during Fridays and Saturdays' rain, to have us ready. And I'm just so appreciative to all of them for all the work they did, for their commitment to the public as well. And also, well deserved, thank you. I'd also like to thank Connie Fishman, Cheryl Herman, Julie Goldberg, Ted Doyle, and everyone else who worked on the fantastic historical photo exhibit on site at Gansevoort and the new photo gallery section of our website that shows the huge transformation of the Hudson River Park area better than words can ever do. I do encourage you to take a look at our website and also go take a look at the images on site. It's pretty great. And people really do forget what it used to look like, even last year. So the news stories are rolling in. I'll share them with you, but in the meantime, I'll pluck one headline that came from Time Out. It's called Gansevoort Peninsula, and it will blow your mind. After listing a bunch of other features, the reporter adds, lest you think planners to have thrown caution to the wind, you should know that the new beachfront area is also home to an ecological salt marsh and 20 million juvenile oysters in the water, all meant to positively contribute to the environmental footprint of the destination. So really, Gansevoort does bring together multiple aspects of our mission, and it's really something I think we can all feel proud of. Of course, that's not our only positive press of late. On September 13th, the New York Times published a fantastic article about the park, including the anticipated openings of both Gansevoort and Pier 97. Rather than speaking about only one aspect of the park, the article talked about the overall achievement of the park and the work that has occurred over 25 years now to build it. It made the point once made by Tom Fox and others at the Hudson River Park Conservancy prior to the Hudson River Park Act that parks actually do spur investment. In our case, the article spotlighted some of the residential, commercial, and cultural buildings that have been built along the park corridor in tandem with the park's build out. The article included lots of beautiful pictures of the park and listing points of interest. It's wonderful to have the news media acknowledge the hard work of the existing and former Hudson River Park staff, directors, consultants, contractors, and community in designing and completing this gem of real estate located along the Hudson River. We still have some excitement ahead of us in the next few months of 2023, including, of course, the expected opening of Pier 97. Fencing and railings are being installed at various locations around the pier, and all the trees and shrubs have been installed. All play equipment has been installed, and the contractor is preparing to install safety surface. Installation of concrete unit pavers is complete on the western half of the pier and is continuing to the east. Work on the new restroom maintenance building is also progressing, with over half the structural concrete walls complete and the remaining wall to be completed in the following weeks. The building will again open at a later date than the pier open space. Construction is also proceeding well at the Pier 26 Science Playground, and I encourage you to walk over and look through the fencing at the very unique sturgeon play equipment that arrived from Denmark and that began installation in August. Alpine is now finishing fencing footing installation and is preparing to install site safety surfacing. They will then follow with installation of fencing, other site furnishings, and landscaping. We expect to open the Science Playground also later this fall. The design team for the estuarium continues to work on building concepts and strategies for using Hudson River water in the exhibits. The trust and design team recently met with DEC to address water strategies as well, and will be returning to meet with the community shortly to catch people up on the work that's been underway since we last met. South of Pier 76, construction of 4 interim pickleball courts to be located adjacent to the storage yard near 34th Street began in July. Paving and fencing are complete, and once the asphalt cures, a colored playing surface will be installed. Courts will be open to the public soon, and I think I challenge several of you to the first match. It won't be me. As I promised at our last meeting, the trust did release the RFP for design and related consultant services for the West 29th to West 46th Street landscape and esplanade on June 29th. The trust received 8 proposals on the submission due date of August 21st. And trust staff on the review committee have been reviewing the proposals and will recommend the highest ranked proposals for interviews by the design committee members as part of the next phase of the selection process. Our goal is to have a recommendation ready for the full board to approve at the December board meeting. We expect to begin community engagement for this area in early 2024. Any questions on design and construction matters?
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Still going. Hopefully you'll all be back for more openings soon. As you know, our recently established Pier 76 task force has been meeting since July to consider the long-term future of this huge site. In addition to the directors of the trust, the task force members include all local elected officials, representatives from community boards 1, 2, and 4, and the advisory council, and a representative from Hudson River Park Friends. We're so pleased to again have been able to work with our amazing facilitators, Carl Weisbrod and Christina Pecorelli from HRNA, and Lisa Switkin and James Tenayanhouse from Field Operations to assist with technical materials and the discussions. We're moving at a fast pace, building on background discussions and work that we did during the 2020 task force process that was interrupted by COVID. Of course, much has changed since then, including that Pier 76 is no longer a tow pound, and also the severe challenges facing Manhattan's office market. I think all participating would agree that the conversations have been very constructive and respectful, and the group certainly interested in the trust's stated dual missions of achieving great public open space while also generating the revenue the pier needs to help support the overall park from this designated park/commercial pier as intended by the Act. The trust has updated its projected financial needs. Community Board 4 has presented on its affordable housing vision white paper. Kevin Quinn has presented an update on the pier's existing condition, and the whole group has been discussing revenue generating uses that could coexist with high quality public open space that exceeds the minimums established in the Act. The last task force meeting is currently scheduled for October 26th, after which we hope to have some recommendations for the state, city, and board that can be further explored to make redevelopment of the pier viable. I'll pause for a second in case anyone has questions on that. Many of you have been participating, so I thank you for that too. On August 22nd, the trust released a request for proposals for marine uses at Hudson River Park's Pier 40, and the proposals are due on October 5th. The existing permit with Hornblower expires at the end of the year, so the trust is seeking to sign permits with 1 or more entities for the large berths located on the north and west sides of Pier 40 for eligible water-dependent uses, including potentially vessels that provide sightseeing excursions and dinner cruises, charter operations, docking of historic vessels with commercial operations, berthing of large boats and yachts, and docking of vessels that provide programming, educational, and other cultural uses and that are revenue generating. The term for the permits would be 5 years, with the trust having the right to approve two-year extensions. Prior to releasing the RFP, the trust met with Community Board 2's Waterfront and Parks Committee, and the trust also reported on the RFP to the Advisory Council several weeks ago. We hope to have a selection made in December so that the new permit or permits can take effect in January. I will keep the board informed of our progress and expect to have an update for the next meeting scheduled in early December. Another source of revenue for the trust is the beverage agreement between the trust and Liberty Coca-Cola Beverages that is set to expire this fall. Under that agreement, Coca-Cola pays rents for its vending machines located throughout the park, as well as an annual sponsorship fee. The trust is preparing a new beverage RFP that should be released next month with the goal of having a new contract ready for board approval early next year. Despite some rough weather, our public programs department had a hugely successful event season with new additions, including an expanded Healthy on Hudson series featuring weekly workouts at Pier 57's classroom space right here, and additional jazz at Pier 84 programs with partner Jazz Foundation of America. The Jazz Foundation also curated the second stage at our Blues Barbecue Festival, which brought a record number of 15,000 attendees to Pier 76 on August 13th, where the weather gods redeemed themselves after being especially unkind to our dance festival. Pier 76 was a gathering place throughout the season, and we were excited to partner with Bike New York for introduction biking classes for both children and adults. Sunset Salsa continues to be a summer favorite, drawing weekly crowds of more than 2,000 dancers, making excellent use of the pier's flat surface. The last events to round out the season are the upcoming Food and Wine Festival, scheduled for October 14th and 15th at both Piers 76 and 86, and Pumpkin Smash scheduled for November 4th, at which we focus on sustainability and composting. The Public Authorities Law, Section 2879, requires an annual review by the Board of Service contracts with a term in excess of 1 year. As was emailed to you earlier today as part of your board packet, you'll find a list of all the trust's active contracts with a 1-year term or longer. If there are any contracts you'd like to discuss, please let me know, or you can always call Kim or Christine if you need information about any of the trust contracts. Similarly, when the board adopted the trust revenue guidelines in November 2019, trust staff committed to sharing a list of active revenue contracts, including leases and concession agreements with a term longer than 1 year on an annual basis with the audit committee. Thus, a list of revenue contracts was also emailed to you earlier today as part of your board packet, and you may again reach out to us if you have questions. We've also emailed you the financials for the first 5 months of the fiscal year. Total revenues for this period were $19.9 million, and expenses, including capital maintenance and equipment expenditures, net of reimbursements, were $11 million. Revenues are a bit ahead of projections, affected somewhat by seasonal variations, while expenses are under budget to date. As our mid-year is on September 30th, we will provide a mid-year report to the board at the next meeting. As was expected, the recent federal conviction of Saifullah Saipov for the October 31st, 2017 terrorist attack on the Route 9A bikeway has resulted in discovery now commencing in New York State civil lawsuits. Plaintiffs' counsel has made extensive discovery demands of New York State and the New York State Department of Transportation related to the lawsuits in the New York Court of Claims. Separately, the Trust, New York City, including the City Department of Transportation and New York City Parks Department, Home Depot, and Lisell Transportation Corporation have all received extensive discovery requests related to the litigations filed in New York State Supreme Court, New York County. As a reminder, the trust insurance provider from 2017 is currently paying all legal fees related to the defense of New York State, New York City, and the trust, and has retained 3 separate law firms to represent each entity. The trust staff is currently working with its outside counsel, Marshall Dennehy, on responding to the discovery requests sent to the trust. Before I turn it over to, actually, I'll pause for a second. Anything from any of this that you want to ask about? Okay. Before I turn it over to the River Project for their annual update on the Estuarine Sanctuary Management Plan, I will also mention that similar to public programs, the River Project had a tremendous summer season with over 100 enriching STEM program camp field trips and public drop-in programs, and the new sensory science program, which focuses on early childhood at the Pier 57 Discovery Tank. Just this past week, the annual Submerge Marine Science Festival attracted 4,000 participants on Saturday at Pier 84, which is extra amazing given the weather we had on Friday and the weather we had on Saturday morning. At the Submerge, children and adults alike were able to take part in an awesome experiments along with entertainment, food, and more. Unfortunately, Friday's session for public schools had to be canceled due to rain. September 30th festivities were timed to coincide with West Side Fest, a new collaboration of 19 cultural and arts institutions along the West Side, including Hudson River Park. And unless there are questions, I'd now like to ask Carrie Roble, our Vice President of Estuary and Education, and Tina Walsh, our Assistant Vice President of Education and Outreach, to provide the board with the annual presentation on progress related to the Estuary and Sanctuary Management Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Noreen, and good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Carrie Roble, and along with my colleague Tina Walsh, we'll review a few select project highlights and accomplishments since last year's Estuarine Sanctuary Management Plan Board update. As you know, the ESMP sets both specific goals and best practices to guide the trust and its partners through managing the park's 400-acre estuarine sanctuary. Collectively, we are working to advance shared goals under 3 management areas: environmental education, research and habitat enhancement, and public access and resource management. It's important to emphasize that this is a living document. It's responsive to evolving best practices, emerging science, and interests from our board, our TAC, and our other partners. The ESMP action agenda by design is iterative over time, and today we'll focus on the last year, sharing some exciting projects that are in motion for 2024. Each year, we'll provide the board with an update on projects that have been keen interest to our technical advisory committee, or our TAC, as we'll likely refer to it during the presentation. And Tina will start by sharing a few updates related to environmental education and public access.
Thank you, Carrie. Well, environmental education has been a longstanding trust priority, as you all know, and 2023 both built on prior successes and welcomed new educational spaces into the park. So this year, our field trip programs are on track to serve over 4,000 New York City school children. They take place at locations really throughout the park, everywhere from our Pier 26 Tide Deck, the Pier 40 Wet Lab, and right here in the Pier 57 Discovery Tank. These field trips offer hands-on opportunities for students to explore all types of Hudson River topics, from fish and plankton to climate change and pollution. These programs were also proactively engaging a wide range of students and build accessibility into the programs. So one way that we do that is through a robust fee waiver policy. Essentially, any group that serves students from disadvantaged backgrounds, for example, Title I schools, are automatically given a fee waiver to their field trip program. This results in over 70% of our 75% of our programs, actually, did the math this morning. All field trips fees end up being waived for those student groups, which is an important part of our programs. And as you heard from Noreen, there's really a lot to be excited about throughout Hudson River Park, and with new spaces that have opened and are soon to open. So in addition to new spaces supporting that ESMP goal of completing the park, these also create new spaces for educational settings for our programs as well. So collectively, these projects have increased public open space and waterfront access. The newly opened Gansevoort Peninsula provides 5.5 acres of passive and active spaces, including a salt marsh, Manhattan's first sandy shoreline beach, and a kayak landing. Earlier this summer, the refreshed Chelsea Waterside Park reopened, reimagining the space to create more usable public space, prioritizing the expansion of green spaces, and incorporating sustainable design elements throughout. And then lastly, right around the corner, the park will be opening another 2.5 acres of public space with Pier 97, which will include a sun deck, activity field, flexible gathering spaces, all ages slide, and more. This year, we've also made notable progress on the estuarium after hiring the comprehensive design team led by Tribeca firm Sage & Coombe, acting as the architect of record, and EHDD Architecture as the design architect. Early meetings have focused on defining the goals and values of the estuarium facility, as well as intended uses for the buildings. The trust has begun the community engagement part of this process and co-hosted a design kickoff meeting in partnership with Manhattan Community Board 1 in February of 2023, where the design team introduced themselves and moderated a discussion rooted in defining the estuarium and defining its opportunities connected to the community. Following that meeting, as Noreen mentioned, they've been working on preliminary building schemes and begun to explore water intake options from the Hudson River. And we're looking forward to planning additional community engagement to keep that open dialogue going with park stakeholders as the project continues to move along. Right next to the site of the estuarium, the Pier 26 Science Play area is on track to open later this year. This unique playscape will feature larger-than-life Atlantic and short-nosed sturgeons, which were installed this summer and feature various learning elements and educational facts throughout. So not just a playground, actually has a lot of information you can learn. When new spaces open in the park, safety considerations are prioritized as part of that process. So for example, the number of life rings available in the park have increased this year through the installation of an additional 11 life rings, bringing the park-wide total to 44, with more to come actually when Pier 97 opens as well. Additionally, 4 rope ladders were added to the park floating docks this year. Again, really showing that commitment to safety that we have park-wide in connection to public access. The trust also hosted its annual water safety meeting this past May, which brings together the park's non-motorized and motorized water-related tenants and permittees. This meeting focused on a wide range of safety and security topics, including the park's water use map, navigation hazards, easy dock safety rails and ladders, and other park safety equipment, including those life rings. And of course, a key element in making sure that people are safe on the water is through safety education. So throughout the year, the U.S. Coast Guard and Nautical School both offer free boating safety and education workshops in our Pier 84 classroom. Additionally, we're pleased to share that we are recipients of a DEC Estuary Program grant focused on signage, which will allow us to bring additional boating safety signage to the park soon. Recreational non-motorized boating, of course, continues to be hugely popular in the park. Last year, 68,000 people rode, sailed, and paddled in sanctuary waters. And we look forward, once the season wraps up, to hearing how that goes in 2023. It's been each year a bit more people, which has been exciting. And of course, river access has also increased with yesterday's opening of Gansevoort Peninsula and the new kayak landing on the south side for non-motorized boaters. So the Trust Public drop-in programs are another way that thousands of New Yorkers connect with their local sanctuary waters. This year, we offered over 400 public education programs, including catch and release fishing, wet lab aquarium open hours, science lectures, early childhood STEM programs, park tours, and more. You can see a sample of some of those events here. Highlights from the 2023 season include increased public hours at our wet lab aquarium, which has so far engaged over 2,000 people for free guided tours of the aquarium. Big City Fishing summer workshops taught catch and release fishing skills to over 700 anglers at both Pier 26 and Pier 51. And then our Ask a Scientist program offered humorous and informative lectures from local scientists and STEM experts, including a special Climate Week event where we welcomed researchers to discuss urban heat island effect, as well as environmental justice. Beyond our regularly scheduled events like those, we also were invited to take part in Emerson Collective's Climate Science Fair, which is a 4-day showcase of climate solutions on the High Line. During the course of this event, we engaged tens of thousands of people and shared how Hudson River Park protects river habitats and builds environmental stewardship. And then, of course, just this past weekend, we hosted our 10th annual Submerged Marine Science Festival. Ordinarily, it's a 2-day event, and we had over 1,000 students scheduled to join us that first day on Friday. Unfortunately, as Noreen mentioned, the heavy rains shut us out where we had to cancel that Friday. But we're really excited that Saturday still moved forward with over 4,000 people attending. Each year, one of the things that makes Submerge special is that it's an event that brings regional partners together. So this year we had over 20 organizations out on the pier with us on Saturday, including New York State, New York City, federal, and nonprofit partners from all over the region, which is really great to still have that strong of a turnout despite weather. And also another exciting element of Submerge, besides the giant shark arch, if you haven't heard about that, we had a new entrance this year. But we also showcased a wide range of local wildlife, including raptors, owls, turtles, terrapins, seahorses, and crabs. This spring, the ground floor of Pier 57, where we are right now, opened, which I'm sure you all know, and it features bookable community classrooms, the expansive public living room, which provides seating and extraordinary views of the Hudson River, and of course, our Discovery Tank interactive gallery and classroom that we're in now. The Discovery Tank features a technology-powered gallery with a series of digital games that explore beneath the surface of the Hudson River and share more about the fascinating wildlife within our waterways. Notably, this environmental classroom is also the Trust's first full-size environmental education classroom and will allow us to offer field trip programs, teacher trainings, and public events during the full year, so year-round. Since opening in April, an incredible 18,000 people and counting have visited us here in the Discovery Tank during our guided gallery public hours that are free for anyone to enjoy. And beyond those public hours, we've utilized the Discovery Tank as a space to expand partnerships with community groups. So this year we've collaborated with 7 partner organizations to host STEAM workshops and lecture programs, including nature poetry classes, wildlife painting workshops, science storytelling, and more. These programs happen mostly during evenings and weekends in order to reach a wide range of participants. For example, earlier this summer, artists from the Chinese Cultural Center taught a series of ink brush painting workshops focused on local wildlife. We also partnered with the Story Collider podcast and a number of science storytellers to share during a special Ask a Scientist event. And we look forward to continuing creative ways to engage the public with the park's science, education, and sustainability efforts in spaces like the Discovery Tank in the year ahead. So because both environmental education and public access have been trust priorities since the onset of this park, it seems fitting to be able to share such significant progress in these areas with you all today, especially as we celebrate the park's 25th anniversary. And of course, that's only part of this year's sanctuary accomplishments. So I'm now going to turn it back over to Carrie, who's going to share progress within park research and habitat enhancement.
Thank you, Tina. So you've heard for a few years now that the Trust has made a substantial commitment to habitat enhancement and ongoing research. Since 2021, we've installed over 35 million oysters into the park sanctuary waters. This is a third of New York City's total restored oyster population. And this summer, we completed the Tribeca Habitat Enhancement Project with a successful install of an additional 4 million juvenile oysters. This project is an exceptional example of partnership at play. New York State DEC's funding support helped to achieve the project's full vision and is supporting our 5-year research program to assess the health and habitat value of these enhancement structures. To date, we focused a lot on the 300 habitat enhancement structures that are submerged off of Gansevoort's northern edge because it was the single largest oyster install in New York City's waters. But today we're pleased to also share that we're seeing some really promising growth on Gansevoort Salt Marsh. The grasses have taken root, they've flowered this last September, which is an exciting indicator of their health. In addition, you can just see right here that they've quadrupled in size. In our preliminary surveys, we've also found schools of killifish, fiddler crab burrows, and a juvenile redhawk. So hopefully this is just the start of this wetland supporting greater biodiversity as it matures. In some more great news, we're the recipients of NOAA's grant through the Congressional Community Project Funding Pot. So the trust received $750,000 to research the habitat value of the submerged and living shoreline at Gansevoort. We'll be executing an RFP to secure a consultant team to lead this research project starting in 2024. And this summer at Gansevoort, we launched baseline studies on salt marsh with Baruch College and are trialing innovative video surveying methods in the submerged habitat zone with partners at SUNY Stony Brook University. The NOAA funding will help us to lead a 4-year research program and result in data that we can use to compare this site to Tribeca and other regional restored reefs and shorelines. In 2023, through our partnership with the City University of New York, we launched a grant to fund CUNY faculty research that furthers trust interest in understanding current and emerging issues for the lower Hudson River estuary. This funding opportunity connects CUNY faculty and students to the park science facilities and staff to conduct research that addresses knowledge gaps and provides focused outcomes for innovative and ongoing research projects. The trust identified 5 priority areas to direct CUNY expertise towards park research, data analysis, and resource management goals as outlined in the ESMP. We awarded 2 10K research grants this year to Dr. Diane Greenfield from CUNY's Advanced Science Research Center and Dr. Chester Zarnock from Baruch College. Dr. Greenfield's research will elucidate the linkages between storm events and microbial assemblage diversity through genomic and biogeochemical analysis. She is working with graduate student Mumun Ahmad, who will be doing water sampling and the lab processing for the project. Dr. Zarnock is then researching carbon and nitrogen cycling in Gansevoort's constructed salt marsh. He has a number of graduate and undergraduate CUNY students supporting this intensive sampling to better understand the mechanisms driving ecosystem structure and functioning in constructed wetlands. To zoom out for a minute, our outreach efforts to foster research collaborations with CUNY and other universities and colleges have helped the River Project team host over 20 visiting scholars from 14 academic institutions this season. These science partnerships extend the park's research capacity and share expertise across institutions while thoughtfully engaging regional faculty and students to study and solve New York City's greatest natural resource questions and challenges. Such projects are helping to better understand design strategies for shorelines so they can offer greater ecosystem services, projecting the influence of climate change impacts on river and wildlife health, and leveraging new research techniques, including environmental DNA and videographic surveys to maximize learnings around fish dynamics and habitat value under stretched resources. As Tina highlighted, the park has been a cherished classroom and field lab for our K through 12th grade students. And now we're becoming a known resource for scientists to conduct research and train undergraduate and graduate students in technical scientific skills. This summer, the park also hosted 3 Tibber T. Polgar undergraduate fellows, researching projects building off of our oyster restoration and water quality work. And those are fellowships funded by the Hudson River Foundation. So in the next slide, we're sharing a few of our visiting scientists. So on the left is Dr. Matt Hare and Polgar Fellow Henry from Cornell University. They're looking at the effects of river hydrology on the distribution and genetic flow of oyster larvae in the lower Hudson. In the center is Tom Quigley. He's a PhD student at Brooklyn College investigating the neurological processes and environmental impacts behind oyster toadfish vocalizations. He puts his hydrophone down and we listen to these oyster toadfish croak and we look at some of the environmental factors existing in the river that may be influencing the behavior there. And then there's Allison Fitzgerald and Poker Fellow Rochelle. They're from New Jersey City University, and they're researching the influence of sessile organism diversity and abundance on the settlement behavior of juvenile oysters. So clearly, these partnership projects are key to realizing the ESMP and growing our research initiatives on estuarine wildlife, health, and restoration. We look forward to, of course, sharing the results from these projects and continuing to make sure that all of our data is something that students and our community can access. So we're pleased to also share that our River Project programs and research commitments are continuing to grow. We now have a total direct budget inclusive of personnel and direct purchases in support of department activities of $900,000. As we explained last year, because we're a department within the trust, this number doesn't include costs like rent, utilities, bookkeeping, HR services, maintenance, etc. Therefore, although the number has grown this last year with our new discovery tank at Pier 57, our year-round programs, new full-time staff, it's still an underestimate of the trust investment in the River Project and, of course, the ESMP as a whole, because it excludes capital construction or that long-term research conducted by our external partners, but of course, financially supported by the trust. So in part due to grants that our department has secured and with the support of our Friends Group, we have more than $400,000 in funding this year from state, city, private foundation, national funders. Our River Project team was able to bring on a science and stewardship coordinator to help manage the logistics, permitting, and reporting of our increased research projects and partners. We also were able to welcome 2 full-time environmental educators that are leading the school and public programming year-round to share the science and wonder of the Hudson River. Our seasonal team also grew to 20 students and young professionals working with our River Project team. And you can see us all actually just right on the south side of 57 earlier this summer in that picture. Funding from the Pinkerton Foundation allowed our River Project department to also expand the science leadership program by half. This is a paid internship program that uses tiered mentorship to create a network of diverse STEM students, practitioner, academics, to really help build science identity, confidence, and aptitude, specifically targeting female identifying students from groups historically underrepresented in STEM. Our 12 high school students and 3 college mentors conducted research on plastic pollution and presented their findings through scientific posters at the American Museum of Natural History in August. And you can see our 2023 cohort proudly smiling under the museum's infamous blue whale. So to conclude, this winter, we will host our 3rd annual Sanctuary Science meeting to review relevant data and findings from the year and consider future scientific and habitat enhancement priorities. We'll then meet with our full TAC to discuss project across all 3 management areas and opportunities for accomplishing goals in the coming year. The Trust's commitment to the sanctuary while creating opportunities for public access, recreation, education, and stewardship is central to the entire organization's operations and decision-making. The Trust's engagement and the collaboration with our partners, new and longstanding, is also fundamental to our work and success of meeting the breadth of the ESMP's vision. So thank you, Board, for your investment in comprehensively prioritizing the sanctuary. And with that, we're happy to open it up to any questions. Yes.
For the oyster project, is this all part of the count of 1 billion oysters?
Correct. Yeah. So when I said we're a 3rd, that's because the Billion Oyster Project is reporting 100 million. And we have already done 35 of that 100 million. They include our projects.
That guy.
That's an oyster toadfish. Croaking, the project that Tom Quigley is working on. So yes.
You must sleep tonight.
Hear the actual croaking of the games and discovery tape. We use the real audio from Hudson
Mhm.
River.
Yeah, he's cute. What do you mean?
We should see them at the tank.
Yeah.
They are mascot. This is what.
Yeah.
That's what the public school students receive, or the teachers receive. Submerge.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for all the work you're doing. It's amazing. I mean,
We're proud. Thank you.
you're touching and teaching.
We love it. From here, should I hand it back to?
I think,
Sarah?
Yeah, hi. Deputy Mayor Joshi had to go, and so I'll be stepping in to finish up the meeting on her behalf. So thank you. Daniel Miller is away this week, so I now will call on Isaac Daniel Astrachan to present the Advisory Council report on his behalf.
I have no slides, and if I can find my notes, that'd be even better. So two main topics that we've been discussing at the advisory council. One which seems to be recurring all the time is e-bikes, and how can we find better solutions for these different mobility modalities to better cohabit. The other one is resiliency, and how do we make sure we don't end up with walls on our west side. And how do we make sure that the different government agencies are coordinating amongst themselves, which always seems very difficult to do. We are particularly discussing how the resiliency measures of the Battery Park City Authority tie in with what will be happening at the park. So we've issued a resolution asking for a task force to be established for all this to be discussed in more detail. That's all I have for tonight.
Thank you. I will now ask Connie Fishman to present the Hudson River Park Friends Report.
Thank you. First, congratulations to you, to everybody here on Gansport, which is truly stunning. And it was so great just to see everybody sort of flabbergasted as they came onto it yesterday. One day, stealing a line from Noreen, in fact, she can do it with me. We're going to hail a taxi cab and ask it to go to 13th Avenue because now we can. For friends, first, our gala is next week. We're getting down to the final fundraising wire and still looking for about $250,000 to raise between now and then. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of you there and hope you're excited to come, and pray that the weather gods are with us so that we can have cocktails out by the carousel on Pier 62. We just hit 2,500 volunteers for the horticulture volunteer program in the end of September. And given the number of events that we have for the remainder of the season, we will probably cross the 300,000 line by the end of this year, which will be our biggest, and surpass our pre-COVID numbers by about 500. Some of the other activities coming up for us in the fall are the New York City Marathon kickoff with Team Hudson River Park. We've been allocated 5 bibs from TCS New York City Marathon as one of their official charity partners for the second year. Other things going on are our Barktoberfest event, which is in late October at the new Chelsea Waterside Dog Park, where we hold an annual event for all of our Four-Legged Friends program members. We are also launching a business council speaker series, probably early December. The first one will focus on health and wellness and its relationship to getting office workers back into their offices, and how the members of the council can actually use their proximity to the park to advance that goal. We have 20 corporate members in the business council now and about 60 corporate members in total. Finally, we have scheduled a late fall event. We call them Give Where You Live. They're held at board members' homes, and it's a way of introducing new friends and neighbors to Hudson River Park friends, educating them about the park, and having sort of a combined fundraiser. Over the summer, we held something similar, a cultivation event at the summer home of one of our playground committee chairs out in the Hamptons, and are now in the process of recruiting an additional 15 to 20 members who were introduced to us at that event. And we also have our annual membership thank you that we did over the summer, which is for the entire membership. We have it out on the frying pan, and we usually get probably 300 to 400 there. And then finally, Noreen mentioned the photo exhibit, which is on the construction fence along the Gansport building until it's completed and the fence comes down, after which hopefully we'll be able to move it to the walls in Pier 40 so that it has a little longevity. It's amazing to see the changes that have occurred. There are even more photos on the gallery on the website. It was a labor of love for our staff to go through, and I think they learned a lot just because they were seeing decades worth of development on the waterfront. And for those of us who were there, we were seeing some of ourselves and a lot of really bad 90s hairdos. But it really is amazing to see sort of a core group of people that has been working on the park from the beginning, and then the incredible condition that things are in now. And that's my report. So thank you, unless somebody has questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Connie. Is there any further business for today's meeting? All right, there being none, may I please have a motion to adjourn today's meeting? Second? All right, this motion is approved. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Oh, I forgot to take a vote to adjourn. Apologies. All in favor? Thank you. The motion is approved. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Hey.